I had just arrived at JFK Airport for a business trip and, with time to kill, decided to check the security cameras at home. Both were plunged into absolute darkness. In a panic, I canceled my flight and rushed home. My husband, his face pale, held the bedroom door tight and said, "Don't go in there, honey." New York City, early September 2025. A heavy downpour had just swept through the city, leaving puddles on the streets. The rows of linden trees along the road seemed slick and dark. The air was still muggy, but every gust of wind carried a faint chill, heralding the imminent end of summer. My name is Cassandra Albright, and I'm 35 years old. From the outside, many would say my life is nearly perfect. I'm a project team leader at a medical equipment supply company with a stable income. My husband, Jonathan Hayes, is 2 years older than me and works as a sales manager for an office furniture company. We've been married for 8 years. Those 8 years weren't always a walk in the park. Early in our marriage, we rented a tiny studio, less than 200 square feet, in the Bronx. In the summer, it was like an oven. The small fan, stuck in one direction, would make you sweat if you were on the wrong side. One time, at the end of the month, we only had enough money in our wallets for a single bowl of ramen. Jonathan, or John as I called him, smiled and said, "You have the noodles. I'm fine with just the broth." I snorted. "That sounds very romantic. And then when you get hungry, you'll just eat my instant noodles, right?" He laughed loudly and broke his cracker in half. It was moments like these that made me believe that whether in poverty or in wealth, we would never leave each other. For the first 3 years, we agreed to put off having children for the sake of financial stability. In the following years, work consumed us, and the issue of children remained unresolved. We once sat down and clearly stated that children were a gift from fate. No one should blame the other. At least, I believed that was our mutual understanding. About 2 years ago, my career took off. As for John, although he was doing well at his job, his career progression was slower. Every time we had dinner with friends, someone would inevitably chime in, "Wow, John, you're so lucky. Your wife is a go-getter and a great earner. You'll be able to kick back and relax soon." John would usually laugh. "Having a wife like this means I have to run even faster just to keep up." Anyone who heard that would think he was pleased, but a long life together had taught me to understand. Sometimes the smile was only on the lips. One day, after coming home, he suddenly asked, "Cassie, do you ever feel like I'm inferior to you?" Taking off my high heels, I laughed. "Have you been listening to someone again?" "I'm serious," he said. I turned to my husband. "Are we in a competition? If you earn money, it's for our family. If I earn it, it's also for our family. Are they handing out medals at the end of the month?" He smiled and gently pinched my cheek. "Well, no one can argue with that tongue of yours." I thought that was the end of it. That morning, I had a 3-day business trip to Miami to inspect a new batch of equipment with the technical team. John woke up very early to drive me to the airport. He pulled my suitcase out of the car and even ran to a coffee shop to buy me a cup of hot coffee. "Don't forget to eat a proper breakfast there, okay? Don't replace meals with coffee. Otherwise, you'll be calling me at night with gastritis," he nagged. I took the cup and joked, "Aye, aye, Captain. And don't you forget to feed Whiskers at home." Whiskers is our calico cat, whom I got almost 3 years ago, and who was spoiled more than her owners. John made a face. "I suspect my place in this house is lower than hers. It's good that you're self-aware." We were still laughing together. Even now, remembering that morning, I never ceased to be amazed. How could a person be carefully adjusting his wife's coat collar and advising her to take care of her health, while in his head a completely different scenario for the next few hours was already brewing? After passing through security, there were about 40 minutes until boarding. Out of habit, while waiting, the living room appeared on the screen, but instead of the usual view, there was only a cream-colored wall filling the entire frame. I frowned. Did Whiskers knock the camera over again? The camera at home could be rotated via the phone. I tried to move it, but the app reported that the camera was already at its limit. I switched to the camera in the dining area. My heart seemed to stop. The same thing. A wall, 2 cameras, installed in 2 different places, both turned tightly to face the wall. I called John. Long rings. He didn't answer. I called again, the same thing. Suddenly, an incident from the previous night flashed in my mind. When I took John's jacket to hang it up, I found a receipt in his pocket for a new bedding set and coverlet totaling almost $1,500. I showed it to him and asked, "Since when are we so short on linens that you had to buy such an expensive set?" John just glanced at it and quickly replied, "Oh, that's for a client. I helped him buy it for his business partner." I didn't press further. 8 years of marriage. Were we going to live by interrogating each other every day? But now, sitting in the middle of the airport, that receipt seemed to appear vividly before my eyes. I called John's office. The secretary, a young woman I had met a few times, answered. I tried to make my voice sound normal. "Hi, is Jonathan in a meeting?" "I've been calling him, but he's not picking up." The girl replied immediately, "Oh, Mrs. Albright, it's you. Mr. Hayes took the day off today." I sat up straight. "A day off?" "Yes, he said this morning he had a family matter. Said he needed to take you to the hospital or for a checkup." I didn't quite catch it. My fingers clenched the phone. In front of me, the electronic board still displayed the flight information for Miami. And I, the person my husband supposedly took to the doctor, was sitting almost 20 miles from home. I don't remember how I thanked the secretary. I only remember that after I hung up, my head suddenly became crystal clear. The cameras in the living room and dining area used the same account, but the video intercom worked through a separate app. John rarely opened it, saying, "If someone rings, you just open the door. Why look at the history? It's a waste of time." I opened that app and scrolled through the history. 10:42 a.m. On the screen, a young woman in a light blue dress with shoulder-length hair appeared, standing at our apartment door. I recognized her immediately. Isabel Vance, a sales coordinator at John's company. I had met her once at a company party. But the chills running down my spine weren't from Isabel's appearance, but from the fact that she didn't ring the bell at all. She entered a code, and the door opened. Isabel calmly walked into our home, like someone who had done it more than once. I stared at the screen for a long time. A voice in my head kept saying, maybe there's another explanation. Maybe John asked Isabel to pick up some documents. Maybe they had work to do. Maybe. But they say the writing is on the wall. 2 cameras turned to face the wall. A full day off taken under the pretext of my name, a $1,500 betting set, and a girl who knew the code to our front door. If I still tried to piece all this together as 4 separate coincidences, I wouldn't be deceiving John, but myself. The boarding announcement was made. People started to get up and pull their suitcases toward the gate. I was still sitting there, stunned. A minute later, I called Sarah Peterson, my manager. "Sarah, I have a family emergency. I won't be able to fly to Miami today." Sarah was silent for a moment. "Are you serious, Cassie?" My voice was hoarse. "I can handle it, Sarah. For this afternoon's presentation, all the files are prepared in the system. Please ask Andrew to handle the presentation for now. If the technical team needs me, I can join the meeting online. All right, go home. Let me know how it goes." I thanked her and stood up. My small suitcase rolled behind me, against the crowd of people heading for boarding. Outside, I hailed a taxi. The driver asked, "Where to, miss?" I gave him my apartment address. As the car pulled out of the airport, the sky over New York suddenly darkened, as if a storm was brewing. I placed my phone face down on my lap. I didn't call John again, didn't text Isabel, didn't ask anyone anything. I just watched the rows of trees rushing past the window and suddenly realized, there are flights that are delayed for a few hours, and people can change their tickets. But there is a truth that if I continue to ignore it, my entire remaining life will be late. I asked the taxi driver to stop in the underground parking garage, not at the main entrance. Our residential complex wasn't very large, and the morning shift security guard knew us well. If he saw me returning with a suitcase just an hour after John had dropped me off, he might easily shout, "Mr. Hayes, your wife is back." At that moment, I didn't want anyone to warn him. Dragging my suitcase past rows of cars, I walked forward, my palms turning ice cold. The elevator from the parking garage to the 14th floor usually took less than a minute. But that day, it felt like an eternity. The elevator door opened. The hallway was empty. I didn't ring the bell. We both knew the code. But I deliberately took out the regular key from my bag. I was afraid the sound of the digital keypad would alert those inside. The door creaked open. The first thing I saw was a pair of cream-colored high heels, tucked into the shoe rack. Not mine. I froze for a few seconds. On the dining table stood 2 glass goblets. One of them had a lipstick stain. A very faint noise was coming from the bedroom. I dragged my suitcase inside and closed the door. At that very moment, John came out. He was only wearing house shorts. His hair was slightly disheveled. Seeing me, the color drained from his face. The first phrase that escaped him was not, "Honey, you're back already, but why didn't you leave?" Hearing that, I suddenly wanted to laugh, a laugh that choked me. I looked straight at my husband. You really wanted me to leave, didn't you? John blinked several times. I didn't mean that. The flight was this morning. I didn't answer. I put my hand on the suitcase handle and walked straight to the bedroom. He immediately blocked my path. Cassie, listen to me first. I'm not deaf. Move, then we'll talk. Don't go in. Those 3 words extinguished the last glimmer of hope in me. I raised my head. John, move. He still had his hands on the doorframe. I can explain everything. Great. I'll go in first, then you can explain. John tried to grab my arm, but I sharply pushed him away. Don't touch me. Perhaps the expression on my face at that moment scared him. John removed his hands. I pushed open the bedroom door. On the bed we had used for so many years, there was now a new silver-gray bedding set. I recognized it immediately. The same $1,500 set from the receipt. A woman's handbag lay on the edge of the bed. The room smelled of a stranger's perfume. I scanned the entire room, no one. John stood behind me. His voice was panicked. Cassie, it's not what you think. I almost laughed again, caught red-handed in his own home, and the phrase was still the same. It's not what you think. A true cliché. My gaze fell on the closet. One of its doors was slightly ajar. Through the narrow gap, a sliver of light blue fabric was visible. The color of the dress I had seen on the intercom camera. I stepped closer. Cassie, John called out. I forcefully swung open the closet door. Inside, curled up in a ball and hugging her knees, sat Isabel Vance. At that moment, my mind was blank. I had once imagined that if I ever caught my husband with a mistress, I might slap the woman, cry, or break something. But when it actually happened, I just stood there, frozen. Isabel looked up, her lips trembling. Get out, I said. She didn't move. I repeated, more quietly. Get dressed properly and get out. I don't want my home turning into a circus. John intervened. Cassie, calm down. I turned sharply. I am perfectly calm. Don't try to test what happens if I stop being calm. John fell silent. Isabel emerged from the closet. She kept her head down. Her face was crimson. She quickly grabbed her clothes and went into the bathroom. I pulled a chair from the vanity and sat down. John stood a few feet away from me and began to speak rapidly. I'm at fault. I know I'm at fault. But this isn't what it looks like. My thing with Isabel was just a fleeting moment. I glanced at the new bedding on the bed. Fleeting, but you had time for new sheets. He fell silent. I gave in to temptation. Gave in to temptation, but didn't forget to turn the cameras to the wall, take a full day off, and tell the office you were taking your wife to the doctor. Your temptation seems very well planned. John ran his hands over his face. Forgive me. After a while, Isabel came out. She was already in her blue dress. Her hair was carelessly tied in a ponytail. John looked at her and suddenly said, Isabel, you should go home. Isabel froze. John turned to me. Cassie, actually, Isabel was the one who was more proactive. And I was under a lot of stress at work, and you and I. Isabel raised her head. What did you just say, Jonathan? John frowned. Isabel, go home. Say it again. What did you just say? Who was proactive? The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. I looked at them alternately. Isabel laughed, but her eyes were red. You were the one who first texted me. You were the one who first invited me to dinner. You told me your marriage had been cold for a long time, that you were only staying together because of this apartment. And now that Mrs. Albright is back, you say I seduced you. John growled quietly. Shut up. Isabel looked at him in disbelief. Shut up? So you can pin all the blame on me? A strange feeling tightened my chest. Not out of pity for Isabel, but because I had learned something else. At home, John discussed weekend plans to visit his parents with me, asked what Christmas gifts to get for both families, and reminded me to fix the range hood. But elsewhere, he was telling a young woman that our marriage was dead. One man, two women. Two completely different versions of a life. I took out my phone, placed it on the table, and turned on the voice recorder. John saw this and immediately asked, What are you planning to do? Record what you both say. I'm not filming any sensitive scenes. Where are you going to take this recording? I don't know yet, but human memory often fails in a panic. I don't want to have to hear you say tomorrow, I never said that yesterday. John stared at me intently. I turned to Isabel. Did you know he was married? She lowered her head. I knew, Mrs. Albright. She looked up, as if expecting me to start scolding her, but I just said, Today, I'm not going to talk to you about who's right and who's wrong. Go home. She bit her lip. Before leaving, Isabel stopped and turned to John. You once said you would resolve everything clearly. I was a fool to believe you. But don't talk as if I just walked into your life on my own. The door closed. Only John and I were left in the apartment. I asked, who turned the cameras to the wall? John was silent for a few seconds and then answered, I did. When? After I dropped you off at the airport. At the office. Who said I needed to see a doctor? He lowered his head. I did. 2 questions. 2 admissions. There was no more room for misunderstanding. I asked one last question. The money for the betting, the dinners, and everything else for her. Where did you get it? John didn't answer. I waited. 5 seconds, 10. He kept staring at the floor. For the first time that morning, I felt that the scariest thing might not be the woman who had just come out of the closet, but the silence of the man standing before me. John sat before me, his head bowed. I asked again, the money you spent on Isabel, where did you get it? He took a deep breath and sat on the edge of the bed. Cassie, you're in shock right now. Let's not talk about money now. I looked at him, a normal phrase, but in this situation, it sent a shiver down my spine. You were the one who got caught. You were the one who hid it. But now you get to decide when I'm allowed to know the truth. I stood up. Fine. If you don't want to talk, don't. John raised his head. I didn't mean that. You sleep in the living room tonight. Cassie, I'm not kicking you out of the house. And I'm not leaving in the middle of the night myself. But don't come into this room. He looked at me for a long time, then nodded. Before leaving, John turned around. I'm sorry. I didn't answer. The door closed. I locked it from the inside. Only after there was no one left in the room did my legs give out. I slid to the floor, leaning against the bed. The sight of the new bedding made me sick. I wanted to rip it to shreds, throw it into the hallway, but in the end, I did nothing. I took my phone, saved a copy of the conversation recording to the cloud, downloaded the intercom history to my laptop, and then sent another copy to my personal email. Not because I already had a plan on how to use it. Simply because after 8 years of living with a man who could look me in the eye and lie smoothly, I no longer dared to trust my own memory. To combat the phrase, I never said that. Around 11 p.m., the house became very quiet. From the living room, I could occasionally hear John's footsteps. I opened my mobile banking app. We had one joint savings account for home renovations, emergencies, and, if children came along, for the future. I usually only looked at the total balance. That night, I scrolled through every transaction. $1,000, $2,000, $500, $1,000, $200, $3,000, $2,000. Some withdrawals were almost a month apart. Some were only a few days apart. All the amounts were not large enough to immediately raise suspicion in the daily hustle. I took a piece of paper and a pen and started to add them up. At first, I thought I had made a mistake. I recounted again and again. $20,000. I sat motionless. $20,000 isn't an amount that would bankrupt a family like ours, but it was enough for me to understand. This wasn't a story of a drunk man who made a one-night mistake. A one-night stand doesn't require 9 months of steady withdrawals. A moment of weakness doesn't require dozens of transactions. I looked at the bedroom door. Behind it, on the sofa we once chose together, lay John. I remembered asking a few months ago, why is our balance decreasing so quickly? John was watching a football game then. His eyes were glued to the screen. I took it for client expenses for now. The office will reimburse it later. I only replied, oh, I see. Just 3 words. A long life together. Trust is sometimes like the keys to the house already handed over. No one checks every day which doors your partner has already opened. Closer to midnight, John knocked on the door. Cassie, are you asleep? I remained silent. He knocked again. I want to talk. I opened the door a crack. John stood outside, his eyes red. I know you're not asleep. I'm checking the account, I said. His face tensed. Over these past 9 months, where did the $20,000 from our joint account go? He immediately said, I didn't spend it all on Isabel. So you know the figure? John pressed his lips together. I laughed very quietly. I didn't even mention which transactions. And you already know what I'm asking about. Cassie, I used a lot of it for work-related matters. I would pay out of pocket first for client entertainment, and then the office would reimburse me. Then show me the proof. It's late. I'm not asking for it now. I'm just asking where the money went. He rubbed his forehead. You're pressuring me like this. How can I talk? I looked at my husband. John, you brought another woman into our bedroom today. And now I'm asking where our shared money went, and you say I'm pressuring you. His face hardened. I already apologized. After those words, the anger I had been holding back for hours finally erupted. Is an apology enough? If apologies erased everything, courthouses would have probably closed down long ago. John fell silent. I took a deep breath, trying to lower my voice. Go back to your sofa. I'm leaving tomorrow morning. Where are you going? You don't need to know. Cassie, don't make the problem worse. I looked him straight in the eye. Tell me, who is making the problem worse? The one who brought another person into our bed, or the wife who finally found out about it? John's face turned red. He didn't answer. After a few moments, his voice softened. Do you remember when we lived in that rented studio? One time you had a fever of almost 104. I carried you in my arms from the 3rd floor to the hospital. We had nothing then, but we were happy. My heart ached. I remembered. Of course I remembered. I even remembered the flip-flops he was wearing that day, and how one of them broke on the way. I remembered waking up in the hospital, and he was asleep next to the bed, still holding my wrist. All of that was true, but the truth from 8 years ago didn't cancel out the truth of today. I said, I don't deny the days when you were good to me. That was the last time that night I called him by his intimate you. I paused, then continued. But beautiful memories are not a receipt to pay for your debts today. John froze. I closed the door. The next morning, I woke up very early. I didn't take any jewelry, didn't touch John's documents. I only took my passport, personal documents, laptop, a few sets of clothes, my medical records, and everything that belonged to me. Finally, I put Whiskers in her carrier. The cat meowed loudly, as if protesting being woken up. John woke up on the sofa. You're taking Whiskers too? I lifted the carrier. She's been with me since she was a kitten. I take care of her too. I know. I don't want to argue anymore. John stood in the middle of the living room, looking at my suitcase. You're really leaving? I'm only leaving for a while. For how long? I don't know yet. He stepped closer. Cassie, we've been married for 8 years. I cut him off. It's precisely because it's been 8 years that I need to leave. If it had only been 8 days, maybe it wouldn't hurt this much. John didn't stop me anymore. My best friend Chloe lived about a 10-minute drive from there. I had sent her a message earlier that morning. Just one short sentence. Can I stay with you for a few days? Chloe didn't ask anything on the phone. Not until I dragged my suitcase to her door did she see the cat carrier, look at my face, and then step aside. Come in. As soon as the door closed, I put down Whiskers' carrier. Before Chloe could ask, I hugged her and cried. I cried until my shoulders ached, and I couldn't breathe. Chloe just patted my back. It was a long time before she said, You can cry more, but eat first. I wiped my face, grumbling. In a situation like this and you're thinking about food, Chloe placed a bowl of hot chicken broth on the table. On an empty stomach, even a divorce feels like the end of the world. Have a few spoonfuls, and then if you want to curse someone out, I'll listen. I managed a weak smile through my still red eyes, just a little, but it was the first time since I saw Isabel in the closet that my chest didn't feel like it had a rock on it. After eating half a bowl of broth, I told her everything. Chloe's first sentence after I finished was, You haven't sent any videos to anyone yet, have you? No. Don't. I wasn't planning to. He's the one at fault. Let him be responsible for his own mistakes. Don't let your emotions get you into trouble. And don't go to his office to make a scene. I nodded. I know. Chloe looked at me. And don't call that girl's parents. I won't. She sighed in relief. Thank God, your brain is still working. That day, I changed the passwords to my personal email, mobile banking, and all my work accounts. I double-checked what documents I had the right to keep, but made no attempt to open John's phone, email, or personal accounts. I didn't want his crossing the line to make me cross it, too. Toward evening, my phone vibrated. A message from John. I know you're thinking badly about that money right now, but I didn't give all of that $20,000 to Isabel. I'll prove it to you. I read it twice and put the phone down. Because at that moment, what caught my attention wasn't the phrase I'll prove it, but the fact that John admitted he had another explanation for the flow of funds that I had been unaware of for the past 9 months. The next morning, John called me. I watched the vibrating screen until the 3rd ring before answering. His voice was hoarse. I want to meet. I'm not coming home. I know. Can I come to Chloe's? I glanced at Chloe, who was peeling a boiled egg at the kitchen counter. She immediately shook her head, as if she had heard our conversation. No. Let's meet at the cafe downstairs from your place. About half an hour later, John arrived. He was wearing a blue shirt I had once bought him for his birthday. But the collar was wrinkled, and he hadn't shaved. If it had been a few days ago, I might have asked, "Did you get any sleep last night?" That day, I just pulled out a chair and sat down. John looked at me for a long time. "Have you lost weight?" I almost laughed. It had only been one day. He lowered his head. "I'm sorry." I didn't answer. The waiter brought 2 glasses of water. John, as usual, ordered a black coffee. I only drank water. He clasped his hands and said quietly, "I know my relationship with Isabel was a mistake. I don't deny it. Okay. But I want you to understand, my relationship with her wasn't what you think." I looked him straight in the eye. "You slept with her in our home. You bought new bedding, turned the cameras to the wall, and then used my name to take a day off. From what perspective do I need to look at this for it to look good?" John's face tensed. "I'm not talking about that." "Then what are you talking about?" "The money." I fell silent. He lowered his voice. "I didn't spend all of that $20,000 on Isabel. A lot of it was for work-related advance payments, for client entertainment, booking hotels, buying gifts. Sometimes clients arrive unexpectedly, and the process of getting money from the office is slow. I used my personal money first, and then the office reimbursed me." I leaned back in my chair. Indeed, the explanation sounded very plausible. Seeing that I didn't comment, John continued, "You know the sales world yourself. Sometimes a client calls and says they'll be there in 10 minutes. Am I supposed to sit and wait for the accountant to process the paperwork?" I nodded slowly. "Where did the office reimburse the money to?" John fell silent. "To my salary account." I asked again, "If our personal money was used first, why didn't you transfer it back to the joint account when the office reimbursed your account?" He was silent. I waited. The cafe was not crowded in the morning. At the next table, 2 female students were laughing while discussing an exam. A man by the door was reading a newspaper while sipping tea. And between John and me, one question was enough to make the air as heavy as a stone. "Finally," he said, "I was using it to float things." "Float what?" "Specifically for work." "Cassie, do you really need to track every dollar?" I looked at him. "I do." His voice rose slightly. "You didn't used to be like this." I also didn't used to think my husband would bring someone else into our home. John's face hardened. He turned to look out at the street. After a while, he said, "There were expenses that were genuinely for client entertainment, for gifts for partners. I didn't take all that money for Isabel." "I'm not saying you took all of it, but you're thinking it." "I'm asking." John ran his hands over his face. "I'm so tired." Hearing that phrase, a deep irritation rose in me. He was tired. The man who had lied for months was tired. The man who had cheated was tired. The man who had hidden money was tired. And the person who had just discovered her husband was leading a double life was supposed to sit here and speak softly so he wouldn't get agitated. I didn't scream. I only asked, "Are you tired because you have to explain, or are you tired because someone finally asked?" John raised his head. "Don't talk like that. Did I say something wrong?" He clenched his coffee cup. "Cassie, I know I'm at fault, but don't paint me as a thief. I haven't called you anything. But you're implying it. I only see that shared money was leaving. But the reimbursed money from the office wasn't coming back. You say it's for work, but you can't explain for what." "I'm asking so I can understand." John growled, "I'm your husband, not your subordinate." I looked at him for a few seconds. "That's right. Because you're my husband, I trusted you with the family's money to use without questioning every receipt." That phrase silenced him. I stood up. "When you're ready to talk clearly, call me." "Where are you going?" "Upstairs, to Chloe's." "Cassie." I stopped. John said quietly, "Don't make the problem worse." I turned around. "This problem became big because of what you did, not because I saw it." I left. In the evening, Carol called. I stared at my mother-in-law's name on the screen for a long time before answering. Her voice was initially soft. "Cassie, honey, where are you?" "At Chloe's house, Carol." "Come home, honey." "Whatever happened, you should resolve it amicably at home." I replied, "I don't want to go back just yet." She sighed. I already heard the story from John. I was a little surprised. "What did he tell you?" "He admitted his fault, said it was just a fleeting infatuation." 9 months is a fleeting infatuation, I thought. She continued. "Men work outside the home. They have a wide social circle. Sometimes they're easily tempted. As a wife, if he already knows how to come back home, you should give him a chance. I tried to remain calm. I'm not asking you to hate your son, but I can't pretend this didn't happen. Who's asking you to pretend it didn't happen? I mean, don't let it get to a point where the problem can't be fixed. I was silent. Carol continued. You should also try to think. These last few years, you've worked so much, leaving in the morning, coming back at night, often on business trips. A man when he's home alone all the time. I interrupted her, still in a calm voice. So, are you saying John cheated because I work too much? She hastily replied, I'm not saying that, but there's a reason for everything. The tips of my fingers grew cold. Carol, if there were problems in the marriage, he could have talked to me. We could have argued, asked for changes. Even if we couldn't be together anymore, we could have gotten a divorce. But his decision to choose another person and bring her into our home, I will not take responsibility for that. There was a moment of silence on the other end, and then she said, Cassie, I'll be honest with you. For a family to have peace, a woman sometimes needs to know how to yield. They used to say, a bad compromise is better than a good lawsuit. There's truth in that. I bit my lip. If it were before, I might have stayed silent. I once thought that as a daughter-in-law, it was better to avoid arguments. My father-in-law passed away early. Carol raised John on her own. I always felt sorry for her. But that day, I suddenly realized, yielding is not always a virtue. Sometimes, yielding for too long makes others think we don't feel pain. I said, I also believe, Carol, that yielding is good. But yielding so that the other person realizes their mistake is acceptable. If I have to yield to the point where the guilty party becomes the right one, I can't do that. Her tone changed. So what do you want now? I don't know yet, Carol, but I won't go home just because I'm afraid the neighbors will find out about our problems. You speak so coldly. I smiled bitterly. I'm trying to be honest, Carol. She sighed heavily. John is already having problems at work. Don't add to his troubles at this time. When I heard that, my morning conversation with John suddenly connected. What problems at work, Carol? Carol was silent for a moment. I don't know for sure either. He just said he has a lot of work. I didn't press further. The call ended with a dry, take care of yourself. I replied, you too, Carol. Putting the phone down, I sat silently by the window. Chloe came out of the kitchen and saw my face. Mother-in-law? I nodded. Said I work too much, so my husband is lonely. Chloe raised an eyebrow. Oh, so if a woman works a lot, she can cheat and get a reduced sentence. A new rule? I guess I'm not up to date. I managed a weak smile, but only for a moment tears welled up again. Chloe sat next to me. Listen, don't make any decisions in anger. I know. But don't let others force you to yield and suffer either. I looked out the window. The flow of traffic on the streets was as dense as usual. Before, I had a thought that maybe in a few weeks, if John truly repented, I would give us both a chance to talk. But after today's conversation with John and with Carol, I realized I needed something else. Before thinking about forgiveness, I needed to understand where I stood, how our joint assets were, how his finances were, and if this marriage really couldn't be saved, I had to walk out of it on my own 2 feet, not run blindly from anger. I turned to Chloe. Do you still remember that lawyer you once told me about? Chloe looked at me. David Chen? Yes, what's he like? I want to meet with him. Chloe didn't ask if I was sure. She just picked up her phone. Okay, I'll call him. 2 days later, Chloe drove me to David Chen's office. Before going in, she whispered, he's pretty blunt. If something sounds unpleasant, don't think I'm defending your husband. I looked at her. My lawyer, or John's lawyer? A lawyer must first defend the truth. Otherwise, you'll have a heart attack later in court. I sighed. Yeah, I know. David Chen's office was on the 3rd floor of a small office building not far from Park Avenue. Not luxurious, just a few bookshelves, a set of wooden desks and chairs, and a teapot that was still steaming. Mr. Chen was a few years older than me, spoke calmly, and almost never interrupted. After listening to my brief story, he didn't ask if I had proof of infidelity or how beautiful Isabel was. His first question was, the apartment you live in, what year was it purchased? I was a bit surprised. In 2021, the purchase price was $950,000. In whose name? Mine and Jonathan Hayes's. He nodded and wrote in his notebook. Source of funds? I sat up straight. My parents gave me $500,000. The two of us had savings of about $20,000. The rest, about $430,000, was a bank loan. Mr. Chen looked up. Was this gift from your parents for the two of you, or for you personally? For me. Is there written proof? I was silent for a few seconds. I think there was a letter my father wrote. I don't remember exactly if it's still there. How was the money transferred? My parents sold some land and transferred the money to my personal account. After that, I transferred it to pay the developer. Mr. Chen underlined his notes. You need to find proof of that. I asked. If it can be proven that it was a personal gift for me, then what? He didn't answer immediately. First, we need to look at all the documents, the flow of funds, how you define the assets, and any corresponding agreements. Don't rush to think that one number today will automatically be the same number in a settlement. I was a little disappointed. For some reason, before coming here, I had an instinctive thought. John cheated. John used our shared money opaquely. John brought another person into this house. Therefore, this house should belong more to me. Perhaps Mr. Chen saw the expression on my face. He put down his pen. I'm going to tell you something you might not like. Please, go ahead. Your husband's infidelity and property rights are two issues that are related in the grand scheme, but they can't be simplified to whoever cheats loses the house. I was silent. He continued. If you want to protect yourself, act with evidence, not with the sense of justice of an aggrieved person. That phrase sounded cold. But, strangely, I wasn't angry. I only asked, so I could lose part of the money my parents gifted me? No one has made that conclusion yet. What needs to be done is to very clearly prove the source of the assets. A gift letter, bank statements, and proof of payment will be very helpful. Only after that will we calculate other rights and obligations. Chloe, who was sitting next to me, finally spoke. What about the bank debt? Mr. Chen asked me, what is the current principal balance of the loan? About $400,000. The current market price of the apartment? I asked a realtor in the area. They said around $1.2 to $1.3 million. If the apartment is in good condition, it could be more. He wrote down, we'll use $1.25 million as a reference point for now, but a more accurate appraisal or agreement will be needed later. I looked at the numbers on the paper. The house that I once chose myself, every tile on the balcony, every cabinet handle, every night lamp, was now reduced to a few lines of numbers. I smiled bitterly. It sounds like we're dividing the assets of a company. Mr. Chen looked at me. A divorce with joint property really does have to be as clear as accounting. The pain remains, but documents know no pity. I nodded slowly. He asked for more details about the $20,000. I told him everything I knew. The money was withdrawn from the joint account. John said part of it was for work-related advance payments. The office reimbursed his personal account. And I didn't know how much of it was actually legitimate. Mr. Chen immediately said, in that case, don't make your own conclusions that he was taking company money or committing fraud. We only work with what you have the right to know and have proof of. I understand. About Isabel, I have the intercom history and a recording of the conversation during the discovery. Keep them safe. Don't edit, cut, or distribute them anywhere. Chloe turned to me. See, I told you. I gave her a reproachful look. The lawyer says not to interrupt. Chloe shrugged. I'm here as a witness to your sanity. Mr. Chen smiled very faintly, then became serious again. Mrs. Albright, I'll ask you honestly, do you want a divorce, or are you just preparing to pressure your husband to come back? That question made me freeze. I looked at the table. For the past 2 days, I thought I had become strong, but when asked directly, my heart seemed to clench. I still didn't know if I had stopped loving him. I'm not asking about feelings, Mr. Chen said calmly. I'm asking if you want to continue this marriage under the current circumstances? I raised my head. Scenes flashed through my mind. John blocking the bedroom door, the cream-colored shoes, the blue dress in the closet, Carol's words about a woman needing to yield, and the $20,000 gone from the joint account. I answered, if he remains the same as he has been these past few days, then no. In that case, prepare your documents. Whether you change your mind or not is your right. But preparation is not revenge. I nodded. I don't want to take everything from him. Saying that, I felt a weight lift from my own heart. I just won't accept the money my parents worked their whole lives for being treated as non-existent. Mr. Chen replied, in that case, the first thing to do is to go home and get the documents. On the way home, Chloe asked, are you okay? I thought meeting the lawyer would give you confidence. Like, don't worry. Your husband is at fault. The house will definitely be yours. I laughed. If he had said that, it would have been dangerous. If the law were as simple as in TV shows, everyone would already be their own judge. I smiled too, but sitting in the car, I didn't start the engine right away. I called my father. He didn't answer immediately. "Hello, Cassie. Honey." Just hearing his voice made my nose tingle. "Dad, what are you up to?" "Just watered the plants. Is something wrong?" I was silent. My father really didn't ask many questions. He waited a bit, then said, "Are you and John having problems?" I was surprised. "How did you know?" "For the past 3 days, your mother has been calling you, saying your voice sounds strange. If everything was fine, you wouldn't be calling at this time, and you wouldn't be silent." I bit my lip. "Dad, I want to come visit for a bit." "Yes, come on over. I also want to find the papers from when you and Mom sold the land to give me money for the house." There was silence on the other end. After a few moments, my father asked, "Are you preparing for the worst, honey?" I looked out the car window. The flow of traffic was as dense as ever, as if nothing had changed. "I don't know how this will all end yet." I clenched the phone. "But one thing I know for sure. I can't keep lying in that room and pretending I don't see anything." My father sighed. He didn't blame me, didn't ask why I couldn't hold on to my husband. He only said, "All right, come tomorrow." I saved the documents. I raised my head. "Dad, you saved them? Documents for money?" Of course, I didn't throw them away. The call ended. I sat in the car for a few more minutes. For the first time since that morning at the airport, I was no longer thinking about whether John would call to apologize. I was only thinking about the folder of documents stored somewhere in my parents' house. Something I once thought I would never need. It turns out there were papers that had been silent for 4 years, just waiting for the day someone needed to prove where all their assets came from. The next morning, I took the train to Poughkeepsie. The early autumn sky seemed pale. Leaving New York City, the tall buildings gradually receded, giving way to fields, orchards, and country roads still damp from the previous day's rain. I sat by the window, hugging my bag. During the trip, John called twice. I didn't answer. He sent a message. "You went to your hometown, didn't you?" I read it and turned off the screen. I didn't know how he knew or if he just guessed. But at that moment, I didn't want any more conversations. I had talked enough, listened enough, and was tired. Toward noon, the train stopped at the station. My father was already waiting on his old pickup truck. Seeing me, he didn't ask about my problems, only said, "Give me your bag, I'll carry it." I smiled. "The bag is small. I can manage." "I know you can, but since your father is here, I'll carry it." A very ordinary phrase, but my eyes stung. At home, my mother was sitting on the porch, peeling apples. The aroma of simmering chicken soup wafted from the kitchen. Seeing me, my mother immediately stood up. "Cassie!" Before I could say hello, she had already grabbed my shoulders and looked me over from head to toe. "Why is your face so pale?" "I'm fine, Mom." "Fine, but your eyes are as dark as if you haven't slept in 3 nights." I turned away, taking off my shoes, just sleep-deprived. My mother looked at my father. My father said nothing, just parked the truck in a corner of the yard and said, "Come in, eat first." For lunch that day, there was soup, stewed cabbage, salad, and crackers. After a few spoonfuls, my mother put hers down. "Now, tell us." I raised my head. Her eyes were already red. "Are you and John having problems?" I stared at the plate in front of me for a long time, and then I told them. Not in great detail, just that I had discovered John was having an affair with another woman. The relationship had been going on for several months. I had temporarily moved in with Chloe and was preparing to settle the property issue. Hearing that the woman had entered our apartment, my mother's face turned pale. She lightly tapped the table. "My God, he dared to bring another woman into the house?" I said quietly, "Yes, Mom." "Give me your phone, I'll call him." She was about to grab her phone when my father put down his spoon. "Why are you going to call him?" "You have to ask. I want to ask him what he takes my daughter for." My father looked at my mother. "Our daughter is already having a hard time. You call and yell at him. Will that solve the problem?" My mother fell silent. "So just leave it?" "Not leave it, but first figure out what's what." He turned to me. "What do you want Mom and me to do?" I shook my head. "I didn't come here for you to solve my problems." "Then what do you need?" "The letter from when you and Mom gave me money for the house, the bank statement, and the land sale contract. If you still have them." My father nodded calmly. "I kept everything." I was surprised. "Dad, you kept everything?" "Yes." He stood up and went into the room. My mother sat in front of me. Her hands were clasped together. After a while, she asked, "Do you really want a divorce?" I sighed. I don't know how it will end yet, Mom. But I can't pretend it didn't happen. My mother wiped the corners of her eyes. When you got married, I thought that since you had gone through hardships together, you would love each other even more when you became well off. I smiled bitterly. I used to think so too. My father came out. In his hands was a brown folder with a slightly faded zipper. He placed it on the table. I've kept this here since you bought the house. I opened it. Inside, all the documents were neatly arranged. The contract for the sale of my parents' land, bank transfers, copies of the apartment purchase documents, and a yellowed sheet of paper with handwritten text. I picked it up. My father's handwriting. It clearly stated, "Father and mother gift the sum of $500,000 exclusively to me for the purchase of a home." At the bottom were my father's and mother's signatures. I stared at it for a long time. "Dad, when did you write this?" "A few days before the money transfer. Have you forgotten?" My father pulled up a chair and sat down. "You said then, why am I going to such trouble? And I said that money, even between parents and children, should be clearly documented." My mother chimed in, "Your father is always so fussy." I also said then, "If you're giving it to your child, just give it. Why the need for papers?" My father smiled faintly. "Now do you see why?" My mother glanced at him. "Don't think you can be proud just because you were right." I almost smiled, the way my father and mother bickered over small things. And then my mother would still put a piece of chicken on my father's plate, making this small kitchen so peaceful. I asked, "Dad, why did you keep everything so carefully?" He replied, "In money matters, even with relatives, there must be clarity. Feelings are feelings, but a piece of paper can save you from a lifetime of quarrels." I stroked the edge of the paper. My mother said, "If it's already clear that this money is from your father and me for you, then fight for that house. Don't let him take it." My father immediately turned. "You're not entirely right when you say that." My mother frowned. "What am I not right about?" He wasn't the only one who bought that house. But if our daughter invested more money, then her share must be defended. And what truly belongs to John should also be calculated for him. My mother got angry. "You're still defending him." My father shook his head. "I'm defending what's right." Then he looked at me. His voice was quiet, but every word was clear. "Cassie, he made a mistake. That's his business. The fact that he hurt you doesn't give you the right to take what doesn't belong to you." I lowered my head. My father continued, "What's ours, we fight for, down to the last penny. What isn't ours, we don't take, not even a penny." My mother sighed. "This father of yours is always with his logic." My father took another piece of chicken. "If you don't use logic, it's easy to make a mistake in anger." I sat silently for a very long time. A few days ago, I really thought I didn't want revenge. But deep down, there was a desire for John to lose everything. His house, his money, his job, and the pride he valued more than his family. I hadn't done anything yet, but that thought was there, and my father had just brought it to the surface. I said quietly, "I understand." "Do you?" He looked at me. "Do you really understand?" I nodded. "I will fight for what's mine. I won't take his share." My father didn't praise me, only said, "That's how you'll be able to sleep peacefully." In the evening, my mother made the bed in my old room. Everything was the same. The small wooden wardrobe, the desk from my university days, the ceiling fan that was a bit noisy. It rained that night. The sound of rain on the roof was soothing. I lay there, looking at the ceiling. For the first time, my heart wasn't in such turmoil. Not because the pain was gone, but because I finally understood. I would not use John's mistake to justify another mistake on my part. The next morning, my mother woke up early. As I was about to leave, she put a container of soup, a box of homemade cookies, and homemade jam in my bag. I laughed. "Mom, I'm going to New York City, not preparing for an apocalypse." "Be quiet. Take the homemade food. There's a supermarket downstairs from Chloe's apartment." "Does the supermarket have your soup?" I gave in. My father handed me the folder of documents. "Take photos. Save them to the cloud. Keep the originals safe." I hugged my mother, then hugged my father. He was a little stiff. He patted my back twice. "Go on. If you need anything, call." I nodded. On the way back to New York, the folder of documents lay on my lap. I didn't know that elsewhere, that very morning, the internal audit department at John's company had begun a review of expenses for the last quarter. And for the first time, my husband's name appeared next to several invoices that made the person in charge of them pause and check more carefully. I returned to New York in the evening. Chloe, seeing my bags, ran to meet me. My God, what did your mom send? It's so heavy. I told her she didn't have to. Chloe opened the bag, saw the soup, canned food and jam, and laughed. A typical mom. It doesn't matter if her daughter is getting a divorce or a promotion. The most important thing is that she has to eat. I placed the folder from my father on the table. Much more carefully. Chloe saw it and stopped joking. All the documents are there? Almost all of them. That's good. I was about to go to my room to change when my phone vibrated. An unknown number sent a message. This is Isabel. I want to meet with you once. I froze. Chloe, seeing my face change, asked, "Who is it?" I showed her the screen. Chloe read it and frowned. "Do you want to meet?" "No." I immediately replied with one sentence. "I have no business with you." Not a minute later, another message came. "I understand, but there's something related to Jonathan that I think you need to know." I didn't reply. That night, Isabel texted again. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want to tell you everything I know." I continued to remain silent. The next morning she called. I didn't answer. Chloe sat across from me, sipping coffee. "Are you going to meet her?" "No." "Then why are you avoiding her?" I sighed. I don't want to listen to stories from someone who knew my husband had a wife but still went ahead, and now feels like a victim too. Chloe nodded. "That's logical." She paused, then said, "But what if she has something you need to know?" I looked at her. "Are you suggesting I meet her?" "I'm not suggesting. I'm just saying that meeting doesn't mean forgiving." In the end, I agreed. We met at a busy cafe near the city center. I chose a table inside. Chloe sat a few tables away. Close enough to see, but not to hear. Isabel was about 5 minutes late. If I hadn't known her before, I might not have recognized the girl who had once entered my home in a light blue dress. That day, Isabel was wearing a white shirt, black pants, her hair tied in a low ponytail, her face bare of makeup with dark circles under her eyes. She sat down. I replied, "Good afternoon." We were silent for a long time. Isabel ordered tea but barely touched it from beginning to end. Finally, she spoke. "I know you hate me." I looked at her. "I don't need to hate you to know you were wrong." Isabel lowered her head. "I know." "Since when did you know?" She looked up, a little confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean, did you know from the beginning that Jonathan had a wife?" Isabel was silent. I waited. Finally, she nodded. "I knew." I wasn't surprised. But hearing it directly from her lips, my heart still ached. Isabel quickly said, "But he told me you two had no feelings for each other anymore." I cut her off. "What he said is his business." Isabel fell silent. I continued slowly. "He lied to you about our marriage. That's his fault. But you knew the man was married and still continued. That's the part you have to admit yourself. Don't mix everything up so that now everyone is a victim." Isabel's eyes turned red. "I wasn't going to blame him entirely." "Good." Isabel clasped her hands. "Jonathan was the one who texted first. I didn't ask." She still continued to tell the story of the beginning. About work matters, dinners after work, caring messages, and John's complaints that no one understood him at home. Isabel said, "He said you were only staying together because of the apartment and the mortgage. He even said you had already discussed divorce." I laughed, but there was nothing funny about it. "He really said that?" Isabel nodded. I looked out the window. The evening before my business trip, John had said we would go to his parents' house on the weekend. 2 days before that, he was still reminding me about fixing the range hood next month. A very talented man. At home, he played the role of a husband. On the side, the role of a man who was about to get a divorce. Isabel took out her phone. "I have some text exchanges. I think you need to see them." I didn't take her phone. She opened it and placed it on the table. In one exchange, John wrote, "I just need to sort out this house issue. After that, everything will be fine." In another exchange, "I can arrange the joint account. Don't worry." There was one phrase I reread twice. "I won't let Cassie take the whole apartment. I have a way." I looked up. "Is this your exchange with him?" "Yes." I saved the original. Isabel scrolled further. There were messages where John promised to marry her after the divorce. There was a part where he said he was living with me like a coworker. I looked at these texts, not feeling the anger I had imagined, only exhaustion. Isabel said quietly, "I was a fool to believe him." I replied, "Believing the words of a man who badmouths his wife to get into their marriage isn't the best reason either." Isabel lowered her head. "I know." After a while, she said, I didn't seek you out just because of this. I looked at her. Isabel took a deep breath. For the past few days, the office has been conducting an audit of the quarter's expenses. There are a few sets of documents from the sales department that are being questioned again. I immediately remembered John's words. And so? Jonathan called me. Isabel smiled bitterly. He said that if the auditors asked, I should admit that I entered the transaction data incorrectly because I had too many invoices. I frowned. And did you make a mistake? There was a part where I was genuinely careless, but there were also some things that were done under his direction. There were invoices that I even double-checked. He said, just do it like this. I didn't press for more details. Isabel took out a stack of thin papers from her bag. I can show you this. I stopped her. No? Isabel was surprised. If these are internal company documents, don't give them to me. But you need to know. I need to know about my family affairs. You handle the office document matters with the authorized people there. Isabel looked at me for a long time. You don't want to use this against him? I smiled faintly. I do. That answer surprised her. I continued. I'm human too. There was a time when I wanted him to lose his job, his house, and everything he was proud of. Isabel was silent. But wanting is one thing. How you do it is another. I pushed the stack of papers towards her. Office matters tell the truth. Admit your mistakes. Don't involve me. Isabel slowly put the papers back. After a while, she asked, Aren't you afraid I'll go back to him? I looked her straight in the eye. It's not because I believe he won't go back to you. Then why? Because now, whether you go back to him or not, it no longer defines my life. Isabel sat stunned. I didn't feel a sense of satisfaction, just that the phrase came out more easily than I thought. She stood up first. Forgive me? I didn't reply, I forgive you. I just said, go home. Isabel took 2 steps and turned around. Mrs. Albright, did you ever want revenge? I looked at the girl in front of me. I did. I smiled very faintly. But there's a kind of revenge that makes your own stomach hurt first. For the first time, the corners of Isabel's lips lifted, as if she wanted to smile. But she couldn't. She bowed respectfully and left. Chloe immediately pulled up a chair. What did she say? I followed Isabel's shadow, disappearing behind the door. Enough for me to know that my husband was busier than I thought. Chloe's eyes widened. What else? I picked up my bag and stood up. I'll tell you when we get home. Leaving that cafe, I no longer saw Isabel as the woman who took my husband, because at that moment, I understood something else. No one can take a man away if the man himself doesn't cross the line. And the problem between John and me had long since ceased to be about a girl named Isabel. In early October, the mornings in New York grew cooler. I continued to work as usual. Returning to Chloe's, I would open my laptop to finish up any remaining work. I tried not to find out more about John's problems, other than those directly related to our marriage and property. But there are things we don't look for that come to us. That evening, Isabel sent a short message. The office is conducting an in-depth audit of the sales department's expenses. I read it and didn't reply. Chloe, sitting next to me, asked, That girl again? Yes. She says John's office has problems with the expense audit. Chloe frowned. Do you have anything to do with it? I don't even know what they're auditing, and that was the truth. Later, from John's words and information related to family finances, I understood. The internal audit department at his company had started a routine check of quarterly expenses. The person in charge was Miss Elena Robertson, the head of internal audit. She didn't know me and had no reason to help a wife living separately from her husband. The problem arose from a few seemingly ordinary invoices. One restaurant bill for over $1,500 marked hosting 3 clients. But when cross-checked with travel schedules, it turned out that one of the 3 clients was in another city at the time. Another client confirmed he never attended that dinner. There was another bill for the purchase of women's accessories worth over $4,000. The note said gift of appreciation for a client. There were also bills for 2 nights in a hotel included in business trip expenses. But during that same period, Isabel was on vacation. All of this wasn't enough to immediately accuse John, but it was enough for the auditors to ask questions. The total value of the expenses that required explanation reached about $30,000. Not all of them were problematic. John was able to prove that some expenses were indeed for hosting clients. There were dinners where the right people were present, and business trips that matched the schedule. But the further the audit went, the harder it was to explain some of the expenses. John wasn't the one who wrote and approved his own expenses. He confirmed the business purpose. Isabel helped collect some of the supporting documents. The accountant checked the formalities. Only then were the documents approved by senior management. That's why everything went smoothly for months, and no one suspected anything. The mistake, if there was one, lay in a more inaccessible place in the true purpose of the expenses. Isabel's next message revealed that Miss Robertson had called her in and questioned her about each document. Isabel didn't wash her hands of it. She admitted that she had collected the supporting documents at John's direction and sometimes didn't ask too many questions, even if she felt something was strange. She also provided the audit department with work-related emails and messages that were part of her duties. I only replied, "Say what you know. Don't report office matters to me anymore." Isabel replied, "I understand. I thought the problem would end there." 3 days later, around 8 p.m., the doorbell at Chloe's apartment rang incessantly. Chloe, who was taking a shower, shouted from the bathroom, "Cassie, see who's there." I opened the intercom screen. John. My heart sank. He stood in the hallway with a tense face. I didn't open the door right away. John rang the bell again. Chloe came out with a towel on her head. "Who? John. What is he doing here?" "I don't know." Chloe looked at the screen and said, "Go downstairs. Don't let him in here." I nodded. But as soon as I opened the door, John immediately spoke. "Are you happy now?" I was taken aback. It was the first time since I left that he had used that tone with me. Chloe immediately stood behind me. "Jonathan, if something happened, let's talk downstairs. This is my home." John paid no attention to Chloe. His eyes were only on me. "You colluded with Isabel, didn't you?" I frowned. "What are you talking about?" "Don't pretend." His voice grew louder. "She gave the documents to the auditors, and you're on the outside pretending you know nothing. You two conspired to get me fired." A few doors of neighboring apartments began to open. I didn't want to turn this hallway into a stage. "Jonathan, let's go downstairs." "Answer me first," Chloe said coldly. "Jonathan, should I call security?" John gritted his teeth and turned to leave. The three of us went down to the garden behind the building. As soon as we sat down, he immediately said, "The office has temporarily frozen all my expense claims. They're demanding an explanation for every detail. Do you know that? I just found out from you. Isabel met with you." "Yes." "What did she give you?" "Personal messages between her and you. I didn't take any office documents." John laughed cynically. "You think I'll believe you?" I looked at him. "Since I left, I haven't been to your office once. I also haven't called anyone from there. But you instigated Isabel. I even told her, 'Don't give me internal company documents.'" John slammed his hand on the bench. "She can say whatever she wants." I was silent for a few seconds, then asked, "And the signatures on your expense approvals, did I put them there too?" He fell silent. Chloe, standing a few steps away, also said nothing. John turned away. After a few moments, he growled, "You want me to lose everything, then you'll be happy, right?" Hearing that phrase, my heart strangely calmed down. If he had asked this 2 weeks ago, I might have responded with anger. But at that moment, I only felt tired. "I once wanted you to keep everything." John turned around. "I once wanted you to keep your job, our home, the opinion of our parents, even this family." John was silent. I said more quietly, "On the condition that you could keep at least one thing." "What?" "Your decency." His eyes turned red. I looked him straight in the eye. "But who was the first to let it go?" John jumped up. "It's easy for you to talk. You're always right, always feeling superior." I stood up too. "I don't need to be superior to you. I just don't want to sink as low as you." John's face turned pale. Chloe gently pulled my arm. I knew she was afraid the situation would escalate, so I stopped. John looked at me for a long time, then said, "Fine, just wait." He turned and walked away. No apologies, no pleas, no reminders of our rented studio. For the first time, I saw another side of John. When he could no longer control the situation, he started looking for someone to blame. What drastically changed the situation after this was not Cassie, not Isabel, but Carol, the person who from the beginning believed that her son had only made a momentary mistake. After John showed up at Chloe's apartment, he didn't call me again. This silence lasted for almost a week. I didn't know what he was thinking, and I didn't take the initiative to ask. I continued to work, went to the supermarket in the evening, had dinner with Chloe, and then finished my work. One evening at dinner, Chloe suddenly asked, "Future ex-husband not calling? Not sad?" I gave her a reproachful look. "Not divorced yet, and already an ex. It's practice, to get used to it." I laughed, but honestly, it was sad. Not because I hoped for John's return. Just that 8 years of living with a person I saw from morning to night, whose breath I heard in my sleep, had suddenly turned into a week of not knowing where he was. It was a feeling that couldn't be called anything but empty. I found out later. All this time, John had moved in and was living with Carol. Her house was on a small side street in Queens, an old 2-story house where John grew up. Carol was happy that her son had come home. She still thought, as soon as my anger subsides and John's work stabilizes, we'll reconcile. So in the morning, she made soup. In the afternoon, she reheated pot roast. In the evening, seeing her son return late, she would ask, "Did you eat, son? I saved you some food." But John grew quieter with each passing day. One day, Carol simply asked, "How are things at work?" John immediately snapped, "Mom, you don't understand work, don't ask." She fell silent. If it had been before, she would have comforted herself with the thought, "My son is tired." This time, her heart began to worry. One morning at the end of October, John left for work in a hurry, leaving his jacket on a chair. Carol, out of habit, picked up the jacket to hang it. A small piece of paper fell to the floor. She bent down to pick it up. It was a receipt for the purchase of a woman's accessory. The total amount was over $4,500. She looked at the date of purchase and froze. The date was just one day after she had transferred $5,000 to John. This had happened a few months ago. John had called his mother in the evening. His voice sounded urgent. "Mom, do you have money in your account?" She asked. "What happened?" "I need an advance for client expenses. The office hasn't transferred the funds yet. I'll return it the day after tomorrow." She didn't ask any more questions. $5,000 was not a small sum for her. It was savings from her pension and the remains of her old curtain-making business. But since her son needed it, she transferred it. After that, John didn't return the money as promised. She asked about it once. John just said things were being sorted out. "Mom, in a few days." Then she forgot. Now, this receipt was in her hands. She couldn't be sure that the $5,000 had been spent on this item, but the two figures were too close not to wonder. In the evening, John returned. She placed the receipt on the table. "What is this?" John, taking off his shoes, glanced at it. "Where did you get this?" "From your jacket." John frowned. "Mom, were you going through my things?" Carol was taken aback. "I was going to hang your jacket." The paper fell out. "It's a gift for a client." "What client?" "Over $4,000, a major client." She asked doubtfully, "Is this from the money I transferred to you?" John immediately looked up. "What do you mean?" "I'm just asking. It's my money, my work money. Mom, don't meddle." Carol looked at her son for a long time. "But you borrowed that money from me." John was silent for a moment, then took the receipt and crumpled it. "I'll pay it back." "I'm not asking to demand the debt." "Then why are you asking?" His voice rose. "For the past few days, everyone has been interrogating me. The office asks, Cassie asks. Now I come home, and Mom is interrogating me too." Carol pressed her lips together. "Since when did my questions become an interrogation?" John didn't answer. He took his jacket and went upstairs. She was left alone at the dining table. The soup was cold. The salad she had prepared for her son was untouched. For the first time, she didn't immediately think that John was to be pitied. She remembered her conversation with me, remembered how she herself had said that men are prone to temptation, remembered how she had reproached me for working too much, making my husband feel lonely. Suddenly, all those words sounded deafening. The next evening, Carol called me. I was washing vegetables. There was a moment of silence on the other end. Then she asked, "Cassie, are you well, honey?" I was a little surprised. "I'm well, Carol. Is something wrong? Is work going well?" "It's fine, Carol." Silence again. I thought she was going to talk about John, but no. In the end, she just said, "The weather's getting cool. Don't forget to wear a jacket to work." I quietly replied, "Okay, Carol, you take care too." I didn't talk about John's problems at work, didn't mention the money, didn't say that Isabel had met with me, and didn't mention that John had just come and been angry at Chloe's apartment. I didn't know why she called, but I knew that if at that moment I had taken the opportunity to list all of John's mistakes, the call would have turned into a complaint session. I didn't want that. Before hanging up, Carol called out, "Cassie." "Yes, Carol." She was silent for a few seconds. "Nothing, it's okay." The call ended. I looked at the dark phone screen. My heart felt something strange. Chloe from behind asked, "What did she want?" "Just asked if I was healthy. And that's it?" "Yes." Chloe shrugged. "Not bad progress. Last time she was still lecturing on how to keep a husband." I laughed quietly. "Your mouth." At Carol's house, the conversation didn't end as peacefully as I thought. John came down the stairs. Just as his mother hung up the phone, he stopped. "Mom, did you call Cassie?" She didn't hide it. "Yes. Why did you call?" I asked how she was. John's face turned cold. "Mom, have you started to love her more than your own son?" Carol looked at her son. If it had been a month ago, she might have rushed to explain that nothing was more important than her son. But that day, she just asked in return. "Asking how a person who called you mom for 8 years is doing means I've abandoned you?" John laughed cynically. "Mom, don't forget who your real son is." She didn't answer. John turned and went upstairs. The sound of his footsteps grew more distant. Carol sat alone under the yellow lamp, looking at the cold dinner table for the second time in a week. Perhaps it was then that she began to understand. The scariest thing is not a mother who loves her son too much, but a love that makes her, for years, every time her son makes a mistake, immediately look for someone else to blame. At the end of November, New York City experienced several days of heavy rain. The morning air was cold. Passersby wrapped themselves in warm scarves, and hot coffee stands began to glow as soon as it got dark. John and I communicated only on the most important matters. He no longer asked me to come back. I also didn't ask about his work affairs. The issue with the apartment was still unresolved. One day, my lawyer, David Chen, said, "You prepare the evidence from your side. Don't guess what the other side will present." I asked, "Do you think John is hiding something?" Mr. Chen shook his head. "I don't guess people's characters. I just never advise clients to rely on the kindness of their opponent." That phrase at the time seemed to me just a display of caution. Later, I realized his words were not empty. I didn't see the event at Carol's house that day. She told me about it herself later, word for word. That evening, John returned early. Carol was in the kitchen sorting beans when she heard her son call. "Mom, come upstairs for a minute." "Need help?" She washed her hands and went up to the living room. On the table was a printed piece of paper and a pen. She asked, "What is this paper?" "John, sit down first, Mom." She didn't sit down right away. "I'm asking what this paper is." John pushed the paper towards her. "Mom, read it first, then please sign it." Carol put on her glasses. After reading the first few lines, she frowned. The document stated that in 2021, when we were buying the apartment, she had lent us both $100,000 in cash. To this day, the debt had not been repaid. She read to the end, then read it again. Finally, she put the paper down. "What is this?" "A promissory note." "I know it's a promissory note." She pointed to the number. "But when did I lend you $100,000? John sat across from her. "Mom, just sign it." She felt like she had misheard. "I'm asking, when did I lend it?" John sighed. "When we bought the house, we needed funds." "Maybe you forgot." Carol took off her glasses. "I'm not so old that I'd forget $100,000. John was silent for a few seconds, then lowered his voice. "You had just sold the garden inherited from Grandpa then. You had money. Having money doesn't mean I gave it to you. But if you say you did, who would know?" The room fell silent. Carol looked at her son. Perhaps she was hoping that John had just made a mistake with the number or that there was some amount he thought his mother had given him. But the phrase "who would know" shattered all hope. She asked very quietly, "You want me to lie?" John started to lose his patience. "Mom, don't exaggerate. It's just a matter of family assets. How can I sign something that never happened? Cassie has a letter from her parents saying they gave $500,000. What, there's nothing from my side?" Carol was taken aback. John stood up and began to pace the room. "I also lived in this apartment for 4 years. I also paid the mortgage. And now she brings letters from her parents. Wants to take all the profit. Am I supposed to stay silent? What's your share? Prove it with what you have." "How to prove it? With what I have." John laughed cynically. "It's easy for you to talk." Carol was still looking at her son. "And where did the $100,000 figure come from?" He replied, "I calculated a reasonable figure. Just 4 words, a reasonable figure." Later, when she told me this, I was silent for a long time because I suddenly understood. John no longer felt like he was making up a story. At that moment, He might have genuinely believed that if I had evidence, he also needed other evidence to balance it out. Truth and lies had turned into a matter of winning and losing. Carol pushed the pen back to her son. I won't sign. John immediately changed his tone. Mom. No. You just need to sign. I'll handle the rest myself. It's precisely because I don't know how you're going to handle it that I don't want to. He sat next to his mother. Mom, listen to me. This isn't theft. It's just so that when the assets are divided, they also consider the debts. She turned. But this debt doesn't exist. Why are you so stubborn? I'm telling the truth. John's face began to turn red. Since when are you on Cassie's side? Carol sighed. I'm not on anyone's side. Not on anyone's side? But your own son is asking for one signature, and you don't want to. She was silent. John became more insistent. Mom, do you remember when Dad died? Who was with you? Who took care of you when you were recovering from surgery? For years, I never left you. Carol looked at him. This phrase hurt her the most because everything John said was true. He was once a son who loved his mother very much, but now he was using those years of kindness as the price for a false signature. She asked, Are you saying that because you were good to me, I should now lie for you? I'm not saying that. But you're now counting your merits before me. John jumped up. Am I your son or is she your daughter? Carol also stood up. This time her voice was no longer soft. You are my son. Then sign. It's precisely because you are my son that I don't want to sign. John froze. Carol pointed to the paper. When you were little, you broke a window. I ran to pay for the damage. When you grew up, you borrowed money. Friends couldn't pay it back. I asked for an extension. You made a mistake with your wife? I called her, asked her to yield. Her eyes turned red. Maybe I've been wrong for a long time. John turned away. Mom, you're starting again. No, today I'm just beginning. He turned sharply. She continued. I thought loving you meant not letting you suffer. But maybe it's because I always stood in front of you that you thought there was always someone behind you to clean up your mess. John gritted his teeth. I don't need your lectures. Then you don't need my signature either. He slammed the table. The teacup trembled. Water spilled. You're abandoning me too, aren't you? Carol was shocked, but she didn't back down. I'm not abandoning you. Then why? Everyone is against me. I don't know about others, but I know this is wrong. John laughed bitterly. Right, wrong, right, wrong. Now everyone is talking to me about right and wrong. She looked straight at her son. Then try to think, why? He fell silent. She took the paper, folded it, and placed it in front of John. I love you. That's why I won't sign. If today I help you turn something non-existent into existent, tomorrow you'll dare to do something bigger. How can I help you then? John snatched the paper from the table. He stood there for a few seconds. His eyes were crimson. Then he turned and went straight to the door. John! His mother called. He didn't turn back. The door slammed shut loudly. Carol sat down on the chair again. The pen was still in its place. Decades of being a mother. This was the first time she had refused to save her son from the consequences he had created himself. She told me she barely slept that night. Sometimes she asked herself if she had been too harsh. But the next morning, seeing another draft of that letter left on the table, she remembered an old proverb, spare the rod and spoil the child. She had never hit John since he was a child. Perhaps it was only when her son was almost 40 that she understood. Sometimes saying no is also a blow, and that $100,000 promissory note never got her signature. December arrived, and the weather in New York became very cold. In the morning, I had to wear a hat. In the evening, I wanted to crawl under the covers as soon as possible. My affairs with John also entered a new stage. There were no more calls with apologies, no more arguments about who was right and who was wrong in the marriage. All that was left were documents, numbers, and the final question, how would the apartment be resolved? David Chen told me, if you really want to get this apartment, you must prove your ability to continue to fulfill the remaining obligations. You can't just say, I want the house. I understood. I had personal savings of about $40,000. In addition, the remaining mortgage was about $400,000. I proactively contacted the bank to inquire about my ability to continue paying the mortgage if the apartment was transferred to me, and also considered getting an additional loan to pay John's share. The bank employee checked my income profile and said, Your salary is stable, your credit history is good, but the final decision will depend on the property settlement documents. I nodded. I just wanted to know if there was a path. I didn't want to end up in a story as a woman who suddenly had millions from nowhere. If I decided to keep this apartment, I would have to pay its price. The meeting between both sides was scheduled for one evening in the middle of the month. I came with David Chen. John was also with his lawyer. Entering the room, we just looked at each other and nodded. I noticed he had lost weight, but I no longer felt the pain I once did. After discussing the value of the apartment, the remaining bank debt, and the funds gifted by my parents, John's side suddenly raised a new issue. He said, "There is also a debt owed to my mother." I looked up. "What debt?" John glanced at me and said, "In 2021, when we were buying the house, my mother lent us $100,000. This debt has not been repaid." I thought I had misheard. $100,000? Yes. I never knew about that. He smirked. Just because you didn't know doesn't mean it didn't exist. I turned to David Chen. He didn't look surprised, only calmly asked, "When did this loan occur?" John replied, "Around the time of the apartment payment. By transfer or cash?" "Cash. Was there a promissory note?" John hesitated a little. "In our family, we didn't use promissory notes. But there is a witness." He paused. "My mother can confirm it," David Chen continued. "The source of her funds at that time? My mother had money from the sale of family property." "Is there proof that $100,000 was given to both of you?" John started to get angry. "My family doesn't have the habit of drawing up papers for every dollar, unlike her family." Hearing this, I felt both anger and a desire to laugh. I said, "You may not like how my father keeps documents, but at least the money was real, and so was the letter." John looked at me. "Don't be too quick to celebrate." I didn't say any more. David Chen just wrote something down and asked, "Can Carol confirm this personally?" John replied, "Yes, my mother is on her way here." I looked at him. He spoke so confidently that I began to doubt myself. Maybe I really didn't know something? Maybe Carol had once given money to John without my knowledge? Maybe John used that money for the payment. But if it was $100,000, why hadn't I heard about it in 4 years? About 10 minutes later, the door to the room opened. Carol walked in. She was wearing a dark brown jacket. In her hands, she held a small folder. John immediately stood up. "Mom." I also reflexively called out, "Carol." She glanced at me and nodded. I noticed her face was very tired. John pulled out a chair. "Mom, sit here." She didn't sit next to him, but chose a chair at the other end of the table. John's lawyer asked, "Carol, can you confirm that in 2021, you lent $100,000 to Jonathan and Cassie for the purchase of the apartment?" John looked at his mother. His gaze was like that of a person placing his last hope on an answer. Carol was silent, then opened her folder. She took out a piece of paper. I immediately saw the figure of $100,000 written on it. John breathed a sigh of relief. But Carol placed the paper in the middle of the table and said, "This loan never happened." John froze. Everyone fell silent. She pointed to the edge of the paper. "He brought this paper home, asked me to sign it. I looked at the space for the lender's signature, it was blank." She continued, "I didn't sign it." John's face went from red to pale. "Mom." She didn't look at him. "I never lent you $100,000 to buy the house." John jumped up. "Mom, what are you doing?" Carol turned. "I'm telling the truth. We already discussed this at home. Yes. It's because we discussed it that I came here." He slammed the table. "You're on Cassie's side now, aren't you?" She looked at her son for a long time. "I'm not on Cassie's side." "Then what are you doing?" "I'm on the side of the truth." That phrase fell in the middle of the room. Light. But I saw John's shoulders slump. He laughed bitterly. "Great. Now Mom wants to destroy me too." Carol clasped her hands. "No one is destroying you. The office is investigating me. Cassie left me. And now Mom comes here and ruins my last chance, and says no one is destroying me." Carol looked him straight in the eye. "You didn't lose your wife because I didn't lie for you today." John fell silent. His mother's voice trembled but was clear. "You lost your wife the day you brought another woman into the home you built together." I lowered my head, not because I was pleased, but because I heard it from my mother-in-law. My nose stung. John looked at his mother as if he didn't recognize the person in front of him. "Are you happy?" She replied, "No." John was taken aback. "I protected you from childhood to adulthood. You made mistakes. I thought the most important thing was that you didn't suffer. But the more I cleaned up your messes, the more you felt that someone would always answer for your mistakes. John gritted his teeth. Mom, you came here to accuse me, didn't you? I came here so I wouldn't become a liar along with you. He turned to me, his eyes full of anger. Are you happy now? I looked back at him. If it had been a few months ago, I might have said something hurtful. But that day, I just pulled the sheet with the property calculations towards me. John. He didn't answer. What is truly yours, I won't take a single penny. I pointed to the documents. But what isn't yours, I won't exchange for the tears of my 8 years either. The whole room fell silent. John sat down again. For the first time since all this was revealed, he had nothing to object to. Not because I spoke better, but because the last life raft he thought would surely save him had just been pulled from the water by his own mother. After that meeting, I didn't meet with Carol in person. She left early. John stayed for a short while but said almost nothing. Before getting up, he looked at the retracted $100,000 promissory note, then at me. His gaze was no longer angry. Rather, like a person who had just realized that the path he thought he still had actually long since reached a dead end. From late December to early January, the settlement of the apartment issue entered its most difficult stage. No one mentioned the fictitious debt anymore. David Chen, along with the other party, re-verified every source of funds. The apartment was purchased for $950,000. The $500,000 from my parents had strong evidence. $20,000 was joint savings. We had paid the initial loan of $430,000 together during the marriage. In addition, there was the remaining current debt, the current value of the apartment, and my ability to continue fulfilling the obligations. One day, I asked David Chen, "Can't we just deduct my $500,000 right away and divide the rest in half?" He immediately shook his head. "Don't create your own formulas and force everyone to follow them. Your documents are a strong foundation, but this property was formed during the marriage and in both of your names. If an agreement can be reached, it's better to consider everything as a whole." I leaned back in my chair. The law really isn't on the side of emotions. David Chen smiled faintly. If the law were on the side of emotions, then whoever cries the loudest today wins. I laughed. It was one of the few moments in the last few months when property matters made me feel light, not heavy. In the end, I clearly stated, "I want this apartment." David Chen asked, "Are you sure that keeping the house means taking on its financial obligations as well?" "I know. I've already spoken with the bank. If the legal documents were drawn up in accordance with the agreement, I had the ability to continue paying the mortgage and take out an additional loan to pay John's share. My personal savings would also be used. It wouldn't be easy, but it was feasible." At the next meeting, John sat in front of me for a long time before saying, "Do you really want this house?" "Yes. Won't living there bother you?" I knew he was alluding to Isabel. I was silent for a moment, then answered, "Of course it will." John looked at me, then asked, "Then why not sell it?" "Because what you did in this house doesn't give you the right to take away the meaning of this house from me." He lowered his head. After a few moments, he asked, "How much will you pay me?" I pushed the draft agreement towards him. After various calculations and negotiations, the amount I had to pay John was agreed upon at approximately $100,000. Along with this, I took over the remaining mortgage. I wasn't happy when I signed it. $100,000 is not a small amount of money, but I also didn't feel a loss, because at least all the numbers on the paper this time had a real basis. John looked at me and said, "In the end, you still got the house." I replied, "You're not leaving empty-handed either." He laughed bitterly. "Do you think this is fair?" I thought for a moment, then said, "Not all pain can be calculated in money and billed to another person." He didn't say any more. I remembered my father's words. Fight for what's yours. Don't take what's not. If I had forced John to lose everything for a moment of satisfaction, maybe I would have slept peacefully for the first few days. But after that, I wouldn't want to realize every time I entered this apartment that I had kept it with the same greed I once hated in him. While property matters were finding a solution, John's problems at work also resolved. I didn't ask. I found out because John himself mentioned it when we were exchanging documents. He said briefly, "I'm not a manager anymore." I was silent. "Has the office already finalized everything?" "Yes." I didn't press for more details. He continued himself. "Not all of the $30,000 was my fault. I was able to explain some of it." I nodded. "Then that's good." John laughed coldly. I lost my position. And you say it's good. I mean, it's good if what was true was proven. He looked at me for a few seconds, then turned away. Later, I learned part of the story. There were expenses that did indeed match the purposes, but there were also those that did not. John received an internal reprimand, lost his managerial position, and had to bear financial responsibility for the expenses that were deemed unreasonable. The company did not hold a trial. No one accused him of a crime. It was a purely internal matter. I didn't call to ask for leniency, nor did I demand a harsh punishment. One day, Chloe asked, "Aren't you curious about what punishment he received?" I was cutting a pear and just replied, "I am." "Then why don't you ask?" Being curious doesn't mean we have to know everything. Chloe took a piece of pear and ate it. "Wow, you've grown up." I gave her a reproachful look. "I was cutting that for myself. Your suffering has taught me not to miss opportunities." I laughed. Isabel also did not emerge from this problem without consequences. Her involvement in collecting supporting documents was reviewed separately. Some things she did on orders, but there were also moments when she knew something was wrong but did it anyway. Isabel took responsibility for her part. Shortly after, she resigned. Before leaving for home, she sent me a message. "I'm going home, Cassie. I might not be back for a while. I apologize again." I looked at that message for a long time. This time I replied, "You don't have to carry this apology for the rest of your life." 3 dots appeared and disappeared. I continued, "If you truly understood your mistake, the next time you encounter a door with a family already behind it, don't enter." Isabel replied, "I understand. I didn't say I forgive you." She also didn't call me a kind sister. We didn't become friends. Some relationships don't have to be beautiful to be considered well-ended. It's enough if the guilty party is willing to admit their guilt. In early January, as I was signing another set of documents for the apartment, I suddenly realized that everyone in this story had already started to pay their price. Isabel lost her job and the illusion that she was loved in a special way. Carol lost her confidence that protection would always save her son. John lost the position he was proud of, part of the money, the house, and most importantly, the right to define how I would continue to live. And I was not a victor without wounds either. I lost 8 years of a marriage I believed would be eternal. Lost a husband I once considered my home. And to keep this apartment, I had to take on a larger debt. But for the first time, I didn't feel it was unfair. Because justice never meant that the guilty party had to lose everything. Sometimes justice is simple. Whose share it is, they get it. Whose fault it is, they answer for it. And no one should force another to pay for the choices they made. February 2026. New York was still shrouded in cold after the rainy season. That morning, I woke up earlier than usual, although I had barely slept. Chloe was still curled up under the covers. Hearing the sound of the closet opening, she poked her head out. "Today, right?" I nodded slowly. She sat up. "Need me to go with you?" "No need." Chloe looked at me for a few seconds. "Then have breakfast first." "No appetite." "You've been saying that for a month. If people could live on air, the price of vegetables at the market would have halved by now." I smiled faintly. On the way, I stopped at a small roadside cafe and bought a portion of pancakes. I sat in the car, eating them slowly. For some reason, the day I once thought would be the most important in my life began with warm pancakes, a few pieces of bread, and the noise of traffic outside the window. Maybe that's life. The events that change our entire lives often happen in the middle of a very ordinary morning. When I arrived, John was already there. He was standing in the hallway, in a black jacket, hands in his pockets. A few months of separate living had made me start to see him as an old acquaintance. His hair was shorter, his face thinner, his eyes no longer radiated the confidence they once did. He saw me and slowly nodded. "You're here." I was silent for a moment. It had been a long time since he had called me you in that tone. I replied, "Yes." No one spoke anymore. David Chen arrived a few minutes later. All matters with property, financial obligations, and the apartment had been resolved according to the previous agreement. That day, only the final procedure for the official dissolution of our marriage remained. I signed my name in one box, then another. The pen in my hand did not tremble. I once thought there would be a moment like in the movies. People look at each other, music plays, tears fall, and one old life closes. In reality, there was none of that. There were only paper, ink, the sound of pages turning, and a woman who sat straight, carefully reading every line before signing. When everything was finished, David Chen collected the necessary documents and said quietly, "My part is done. If you need anything, you can call." I thanked him. He didn't say, "Congratulations on your new life." Maybe he understood that there are days when people don't need congratulations. I went out. The sky was clear, but there was no sun. The wind in the hallway was cold. After walking a few steps, I heard from behind Cassie. I stopped. John was standing a few feet away from me. "Can we talk for a bit?" I looked at my watch and nodded. We went to the park opposite. In a corner stood a few bare trees. The cafe across the street was quietly playing the radio. The voices of people mixed with the noise of cars. John stood next to me, silent for a long time. I asked, "What do you want to talk about?" He looked at the tips of his shoes. "So, this is really the end, isn't it?" I didn't know what to answer. In the end, I said, "Yes." John smiled very faintly. "I thought you'd be happy at a moment like this. I used to think so too." He looked up. "Not happy?" I looked at the road. 8 years is not a failed business deal where you can just throw a party when it's over. He fell silent. That phrase made me remember a lot of things myself. After the wedding, a drunk John sat and took out every pin from my hair, afraid I would sleep in pain. In the first year in the rented studio, when there was a downpour and flooding, he carried me through the puddles because I was wearing a skirt. One time I was sick. He stayed up all night, changing compresses. And maybe what makes divorce so painful is not that the entire past was bad, but precisely that there were very good days in the past. John spoke. "Cassie." "Yes. Did you ever truly love me?" That question sounded both foolish and sad. I answered, "I did." He looked at me for a long time. I continued, "If I hadn't, it wouldn't have hurt this much." John's eyes turned red. He turned away. "I know it's too late to say anything now." I didn't answer. Sometimes I still think, what if you hadn't come back that day? Hearing that, my heart ached a little. If I hadn't come back, it would have still happened. I just wouldn't have known yet. John laughed bitterly. "Yeah, that's true too." He kicked a small stone under his foot. "I lost my position, lost the house, and now I've lost you." I looked at him. "You haven't lost everything. You still have your share of the property, you have your health, you have your mother, and you have time to live differently." He smiled. "It's easy for you to say. I'm not saying it's easy," I said slowly. "I just don't want the rest of your life to be a story about how you lost everything because of Cassie." He was taken aback. I continued. "What you lost, you need to look at where it all started." John lowered his head. After a few moments, he asked, "And if I change, what do you think?" I didn't answer right away. He looked at me, his voice softer. "I mean, if one day I live differently, will we still have a chance?" I looked at the man in front of me. I knew he was waiting for a loophole. It would have been enough to say, "We'll see," or "I don't know yet," and he would have clung to that phrase. But I didn't want to give him a hope I no longer believed in myself. "John." He looked at me. "I miss the you that you used to be." His eyes were completely red. "I once loved a man who could give me half of his bowl of soup when there were only a few dollars left in his wallet. I once believed that this man would grow old with me." I stopped. But I can't use the memories of a good man to continue living with a man who has already chosen a different path. John was silent for a long time. The wind blew stronger. He took half a step forward. "Can I hug you one last time?" I looked at him and took a small step back. Just half a step, but we both understood. John stopped. His hands fell to his sides. I said, "It's over." He nodded, not insisting. I turned. After walking a few steps, I heard him call out very quietly, "Cassie." I stopped but didn't turn around. He said, "I'm sorry." This time, I didn't say, "It's okay," because some things are definitely not. And forgiving someone in your heart didn't mean you had to say their actions left no wounds. I just stood silently for a few seconds, then walked on. Beyond the gates, the flow of people was the same as ever. A food cart vendor was handing warm pretzels to customers. A father was helping his child cross the street. A bus had just stopped. No one knew that an 8-year marriage had just ended nearby. I opened the car door. Before getting in, I remembered my wedding day. I once thought that I would only leave the house with this man by my side once. It turned out that life has many turns we can't predict. I started the engine. The car slowly pulled away. For the first time since that day, I didn't look in the rearview mirror to see if he was still standing there. About a month later, Carol called me. I was at the office, just out of a meeting. I stopped in the middle of the hallway. Since everything ended, we had barely communicated. I still had her number saved as Mom, but seeing that name that day, my heart felt something strange. I answered, "Hello." There was a moment of silence on the other end. Then she said, "Cassie, this is Carol." I was taken aback. She called herself by her first name, not Mom, as before. Just one phrase. But it was as if it put a period on the past 8 years. I replied, "Yes, Carol." "Is something wrong? Do you have time this weekend? I'd like to meet for a little while." I didn't answer right away. Honestly, I thought about refusing. Not out of anger, but because I was afraid the meeting would turn into a counseling session for me to give John a chance. I didn't want to refuse again. Maybe she guessed. "I won't persuade you to go back, don't worry." I was silent. She continued, "I just want to talk to you about some things." In the end, I agreed. We met at a small tea house near the market where she usually shopped. It was a clear evening. The trees on the roadside were already starting to turn green after the rainy season. When I arrived, Carol was already sitting there. In front of her were 2 glasses of iced tea and a box of homemade cookies under the chair. I knew immediately it was for me. For the 8 years I was her daughter-in-law, every time I visited her, she always gave me something to take with me. Sometimes a jar of homemade jam, sometimes apples, sometimes just a box of cookies that she said were very good. I pulled up a chair and sat down. She looked at me. "You've lost a little weight." I smiled faintly. "Same as always, Carol." She picked up the box of cookies. "I bought oranges. Take them home." I looked at the box of cookies for a few seconds, then said, "Next time, don't worry, Carol." As soon as the phrase came out, we both fell silent. Carol looked at me. I also realized that I had called her by her first name. Not Mom. The words that were once so close now sounded formal. She lowered her head. "Yes." Her voice was very quiet. After a few moments, she smiled bitterly. "Hearing how formally you address me, I only now realize that it's really over." I didn't know what to say. She asked, "Where are you living now?" "Still at Chloe's, Carol. Maybe I'll go back to the apartment soon." She nodded. "That's good." She didn't ask if John would be there. Didn't say that this apartment was once your home. She just picked up her glass of tea. I waited for her to start the conversation. "I want to apologize." I looked at her. "It's in the past, Carol." "Being in the past doesn't mean I wasn't wrong." I was silent. She said slowly, "Before, when you called about John, I blamed you for working so much. I said a woman should yield." Her eyes turned red. "I've been thinking about it ever since." I sighed quietly. She looked at her hands. "I used to think that keeping a family together meant making sure outsiders didn't know about our problems. A husband and wife argue, close the door. The husband makes a mistake, the wife yields a little. The child misbehaves, the mother covers for them. The important thing is that everything looks peaceful from the outside." She laughed bitterly. Now I realize that kind of peace is only behind the door. I looked at her. This was the first time she had spoken without making excuses for John. Forcing a sick person to be quiet so the neighbors don't find out, that's not preserving a family. I didn't say, "I forgive you," because there were things that didn't require formal apologies. I just said, "I'm not angry with you anymore, Carol." She looked up, her eyes completely red. "Really?" "Yes." I poured tea into her glass. "I used to be angry, especially when you said that maybe because I was busy, John acted that way." She lowered her head. "I know you were very hurt. I know that now." I shook my head. "You didn't know before." She was silent. "But now I don't want to carry that anger with me. I no longer live with you. I am no longer your daughter-in-law. Holding on to anger only tires us both." She took a napkin. "My husband died early. All my life I only had John. Maybe that's why I always thought that no matter what he did, I had to be on his side." I replied, "Loving your child is natural, Carol." "No." She shook her head. "The right kind of love is different. I loved him by always cleaning up his messes. Until he was almost 40, he still thought that if he had a mother, there would always be someone to help." She smiled bitterly. "In this mistake, there is my share too." I didn't argue. Because this time, she wasn't speaking to blame herself. She was just looking straight at the part of the responsibility she had never wanted to see before. After a while, she asked, "And John, have you heard from him?" I shook my head. "No, Carol." She nodded. "He still lives with me." I didn't press for more details. She didn't elaborate either. That calmed me. If she had started talking about how John had lost his job, couldn't sleep, or was remorseful, I would have had to build a wall again. But she only said, he has to live his own life. I looked at her and nodded slowly. It was a long time before she asked, Cassie, can I ask you one question? You don't have to answer if you don't want to. Please, Carol, if one day John really changes, would you consider him again? I wasn't angry. I understood. For a mother, this question was almost inevitable. I thought for a moment, then said, if he changes, it will be good for him. She looked at me, and for you? I smiled very faintly. People don't always change to get back the past, Carol. She fell silent. He will live a better life. I am sincerely happy for him. But his future better life should not be the price of my return. Her eyes turned red again. This time, she didn't offer any more advice, only said, I understand. We sat for about 10 more minutes. When we stood up, I took the box of cookies. She smiled and said, don't buy them next time, but still take this one. I smiled too. This one is already bought, Carol. It's a shame to waste it. Just like you taught me to be frugal. We both laughed, just for a moment. But this laughter was no longer like between a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. More like two women who had once shared a roof for 8 years and were now standing on opposite sides of a closed door. Before saying goodbye, Carol gently took my hand. Cassie. Yes, Carol, thank you for agreeing to sit with me in the end. I took her hand in return. Take care, Carol. She nodded. I turned. After walking a few steps, I heard her call out, enjoy the cookies later. I turned around and smiled. Yes. And walked on. I no longer called her mom, but there was no need to make the person who was once my mother-in-law a stranger. Maybe maturity is sometimes simple, knowing that a relationship has ended, but not for that reason canceling out all the days that were once meaningful. In early April, I moved out of Chloe's. That morning, she stood in the middle of the living room, arms crossed, looking at my 2 suitcases, and asked, have you thought this through? Yes. And what if you go back there and at night remember the old times? What will you do? Not sleep. Chloe's eyes widened. What a cheeky answer you have. I laughed. I can't live with you until I'm 80 just because I'm afraid of one bedroom. Chloe sat on the sofa. Or sell the apartment. With the money, you can buy another place. New house, new neighbors, no closets with ghosts. I knew she was saying this out of concern. For several months, there were nights when I woke up from a nightmare in which the door of that closet opened. But I had thought about it for a long time. I won't sell. Chloe looked at me. Pity about the money? I shook my head. Because I have no reason to run away from my own home. She fell silent. I continued. Bad things happened in the house doesn't mean the house is bad. If I leave just because of what John did, it's like letting him decide where I can live. Chloe looked at me, then nodded. That's logical too. She stood up and pointed to a stack of boxes. Then I'll help you tonight. No need. I'm not asking for permission. In the evening, the 2 of us returned to the apartment. I opened the door. The smell of a long-closed space was a bit musty. Whiskers, as soon as she was released from the carrier, immediately ran around the living room, sniffing every corner like an inspector before finally jumping onto the sofa. Chloe looked at her. There, the real owner has returned. I laughed. The apartment was the same as I had left it. The dining table, the sofa, the key holder by the door, everything was so familiar that my chest tightened a little. I stood in front of the bedroom door for a long time. Chloe didn't rush me. Finally, I opened it myself. The bedding from that day had long been replaced, but the bed was the same, and that closet still stood in the corner. I looked at it and said to Chloe, I'm selling this. Selling it? Yes. I thought you said you wouldn't run from memories. I'm not running. I entered the room, but I also have no obligation to keep this closet to prove that I'm strong. Chloe laughed. I like that phrase. 2 days later, I sold that closet. A young couple came, saw that it was in good condition, and bought it right away. As they were carrying it out, I just watched without any particular feeling. No piercing pain, no sense of victory, just a feeling that the room had become more spacious. I changed the curtains to a lighter color, repainted one wall, changed the night lamps, and bought a new, much simpler bedding set. Chloe, seeing the receipt, remarked, Wow, not tens of thousands this time? I gave her a reproachful look. This is for sleeping, not for display in a palace. She laughed until she cried. Such small jokes gradually brought this house back to life. Whiskers adapted the fastest. On the third day, she was already sleeping soundly in the middle of the new bed with an expression on her face as if it was my fault for leaving her. One day, returning late from work, I opened the door. Seeing her run to meet me and meow, my heart suddenly filled with peace. I started cooking again. Sometimes just a bowl of noodles with an egg. Sometimes, if I had time, I would make pot roast and mashed potatoes. Part of it for Chloe. Life didn't immediately become bright, but it was gradually becoming mine. At the same time, the project in Miami, for which I had once canceled my flight, was now entering the next stage. Sarah Peterson called me in. "Cassie, do you want to take on this project again?" I was a little surprised. "Do you still trust me?" "Why not?" I smiled. "Last time, I suddenly canceled my trip." Sarah looked at me. "You gave advance notice, handed over all the documents, and still participated in online meetings when needed. Family emergencies can happen to anyone." She leaned back in her chair and said, "I don't judge a person by whether they've faced problems. I look at how they handle their work when those problems come." Hearing that phrase, a lump formed in my throat. "I accept, Sarah." This time, I really did fly to Miami. In the morning at the airport, I unconsciously looked at the chair where I had sat almost a year ago, but I didn't open the home security camera app. I just sent a message to Chloe, "Feed Whiskers, okay?" She immediately replied, "The service costs a pot of soup." I replied, "Robber." 3 days later, I returned with a signed acceptance contract that was completed on time. At the end of the quarter, Sarah announced that the board of directors wanted me to lead a larger team with additional responsibility for 2 projects in the Western region, not some outstanding position. I still had to attend meetings, review reports, and sometimes return late at night. But for the first time in months, I saw a path ahead of me that had nothing to do with my status as someone's wife. One evening at the end of August, David Chen sent a message. "If you have time, I'd like to treat you to coffee. This time, without documents." I looked at that message for a long time. All our legal matters had been finished several months ago. I agreed. We met at a small cafe. He was, as usual, a man of few words. Almost half a cup was drunk before he said, "I'm going to say something. If you're uncomfortable, just pretend you didn't hear it." I laughed. That kind of start sounds dangerous. He smiled too. "I like you." I was silent. No anger, no complete surprise. He continued, "I didn't want to say this before because you were my client then and had just gone through family problems." I nodded. "Thank you, David." "But," he smiled. "You already knew there would be a but, didn't you? Usually after thank you there is." I looked out the window. I don't want to start a new relationship right now. It was the first time I had naturally called myself I in a non-professional context with him. David Chen's face didn't change. I don't want to fall in love with someone just because he was kind to me when I had just been hurt by another person. He slowly nodded. "I understand. I want to know that I can live alone, happily and well. If I fall in love with someone later, I want it to be because I like him, not because I need saving." He stirred his coffee, then "Live well first." I looked at him. "You're not disappointed?" "Disappointed, of course." He smiled. "But disappointment and coercion are 2 different things." I laughed. He raised his cup. "Let's just drink coffee for now." Coffee is not a marriage certificate. When a lawyer says that, it sounds suspicious. "Don't worry, I'm without documents today." We both laughed. That night, I drove home. Opening the door, Whiskers ran out, rubbing against my legs. I turned on the living room light. The new curtains swayed gently because the balcony door was ajar. I stood in the middle of the apartment, looking around. There was no more of that old closet, that bedding, the sound of John's footsteps in the living room, but I didn't feel that this house was empty. I suddenly understood. It took me months to get back my home. But the hardest thing to get back was not this apartment, but the feeling that this life, with or without someone, I could still stand on my own 2 feet. In early September 2026, I drove to Poughkeepsie to visit my parents. Exactly 1 year after that morning when I sat at the airport, looking at 2 security cameras turned to the wall. That day, the sky was also overcast, just like now. The difference was that a year ago, I was sitting in a taxi with cold hands, not knowing what would be left of my life when the door of my home opened. Today, on the passenger seat were only 2 boxes of pastries for my parents and a bag of vitamins that my mother said not to buy, but I bought anyway. The car had just entered the side street. I already saw my mother in the yard. She was hastily taking down the laundry because it was about to rain. I rolled down the window. Mom, let me. My mother turned around. You're in nice shoes. As soon as you step in the mud, you'll complain. I parked the car and ran inside. Shoes are just things. No need to fuss over them. My mother looked at me reproachfully. You buy expensive things, then walk in the mud. Then they break, and you'll say it's no big deal. My father, sitting on the porch fixing the handle of a hoe, laughed. She earns her own money. She buys her own things. What are you worried about? My mother immediately turned. You be quiet. The jacket I bought you last year, you still keep it. You say you'll only wear it to a wedding. I laughed. My father lowered his head, continuing his work as if he hadn't heard. Just a few phrases of this little argument, and my heart felt at peace. That day, my mother made all my favorite dishes from childhood. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, and salad. My father poured iced tea. Seeing that I had finished my meal, he asked, Is work going well, honey? It's good. I heard from your mother. They say you've been given a new team to lead. I smiled. Yes, more work. Sounds great, but in the evening, I still have to stay late, redoing reports. My father nodded. Having a job that can feed you is already good. My mother chimed in. You talk as if our daughter just graduated from university. Am I wrong? I put a piece of chicken on my mother's plate. Whatever Dad says, you'll still argue. We've lived for decades. If not like this, it would be boring. The three of us laughed. Almost finished eating, my father suddenly asked. Have you heard anything about John? The spoon in my hand paused for a moment. No pain, no anger, just a name that hadn't been mentioned in front of me for a long time. I shook my head. No. Yes. My mother looked at me carefully. You don't communicate at all? No need anymore. My father didn't press further. He just nodded and continued eating. The way my father stopped at the right moment let me know that he was truly at ease. Not because John had disappeared, but because that name no longer had the power to deprive his daughter of sleep. At that very moment, my phone vibrated. It was Chloe. As soon as I answered, her voice rang out. Hey, I just ran into an acquaintance from John's old office. Says he's now. I smiled. Chloe. Huh? No need. The news is quite shocking. Let others be surprised. There was a 2-second silence on the other end. Then she laughed loudly. Damn, you've really seen the light. I leaned back in my chair. He is officially not my problem anymore. Chloe laughed even louder. Okay, for that phrase, I'll give you a 9 out of 10. Why not a 10? I have to leave some room for improvement. Keep trying. I hung up, smiling. My mother looked at me. Chloe? Yes, Mom. Is that girl still as talkative as ever? If she wasn't, I'd think she was sick. Outside, a strong wind suddenly blew. My mother looked at the sky. Oh, there's still laundry hanging. The two of us ran outside. The first drops of rain fell on the porch floor. I took my father's jacket off the line. My mother was gathering a few towels. We ran and laughed because the rain came so quickly. By the time we managed to get under the porch roof, my shoulders were already wet. I stood there, looking at the intensifying rain. Suddenly, I remembered the cream-colored wall on my phone screen a year ago. 2 cameras, 1 receipt, a girl who knew the code, a husband who saw me off to the airport and then came back to meet another. That day, I thought I had missed my flight. Later, I realized, if I had gotten on the plane that day, the betrayal would have still been there. I just wouldn't have seen it yet. Maybe it would have taken me a month, a year, or several years to continue living in a marriage where I only knew half the truth. The rain outside was getting heavier. My mother patted my hair. What are you standing there for? Come in, you'll catch a cold. I smiled. A little rain, Mom. My father called from inside. There's still food. Do you want it to get cold? My mother turned to go in. I know. Such a grumbler. I laughed out loud. I used to think that the most beautiful ending was when John lost everything and saw me successful. Later, I realized that wasn't it. John has his own life. He has to be responsible for his choices. And if one day he becomes better, that's good. Isabel has to be responsible for her mistake. But she also has the right to start over if she truly understands the line she once crossed. It took Carol a long time to understand that loving a child doesn't mean covering up their mistakes. And I learned that being kind doesn't mean yielding without limits. A wife can yield for love, for the sake of preserving harmony. But if you constantly yield to the point where you have to put your dignity below someone else's feet, then sometimes all that's left is the shell of a marriage. They say a guilty conscience needs no accuser, and an honest person has nothing to fear. I think it's the same with people. When we decide to fight for what belongs to us, not to take what's not ours, and not to make mistakes just because we've been hurt, our hearts feel light. Maybe it will take time. Maybe we'll have to pay a price. But when we sleep at night, we don't have to be afraid that one day, looking in the mirror, we won't recognize ourselves anymore. My mother called again. Cassie, have some more. I turned around. In that small kitchen, my father was waiting. My mother had already placed a warm dinner plate at my seat. I walked in. This time, I no longer looked at the rain behind me. If my story has left one message, I only hope that you will remember that in life, you need to know how to forgive, but not to use the word sorry to justify mistakes. Preserving a family is valuable, but preserving your dignity and honesty is no less important. Yes,